welcome or welcome back, as the case may be, to the Atlantean Archive. This channel is still brand new, but over the last week it's experienced some growth, especially the last video I did, Robert E. Howard's Tower of the Elephant story. That review has gotten quite a few more views than I expected any video I made at this point in a brand new channel to get. So I appreciate all of those of you who have dropped by, you've subscribed, and left a like, and even those who have commented. We've had some good comments on there. It's been fun getting into those. I love stories and storytelling, and it's always great to be able to geek out with other people who do too. So with that in mind, I know it's popular on BookTube to do book hauls, where you talk about books you've just bought recently or books that people have sent you. So I thought I would get into that. Probably won't do many of these. Over the last few years, my book buying has kind of slowed down some. Main reason being that the books that I've accumulated that I have not read are shaming me more effectively than ever. Over the last few months, I have bought more books. I've been visiting more used bookstores in town, on trips out of town, and I've been kind of just book binging. But anyway, yeah, the old books, they are shaming me. They want to be read. I made promises that I have not kept. Every time I come in with new books, I see the old ones sitting there staring at me with their pouty paperback faces. You know, it's kind of like friends that you made once upon a time, and when you first met each other, you had a great time, you know, got along really well. You're going to call, you're going to text, you're going to get together, you're going to do some stuff. You are going to do it until you don't. And then the next time you see them, you've got new friends that you're bringing in, and the old ones are just sitting there going, really? This is how it is, huh? This is how it is. So just feel that way whenever I walk in with new books to put on the shelf. You know, they come in, they're all excited, like the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, Volume 1. It comes in, it's all nice and happy, and it's looking at the other books going, you know, hey, how you doing? Nice to be here. And books like The Close Encounters of the Third Kind novelization are just going, get comfortable, dude. It's going to be a long wait. So in that vein, I've been trying to work out some kind of a plan for catching up with that. It's been somewhat successful, but life being what it is, you don't always have the time to read that you want to. So I'm trying to get there. I promise I will get there at some point. But in the meantime, my name is Robert, and I am a bookaholic. So going with that, since I've already shown it off here, the Science Fiction Hall of Fame will lead us off. Science Fiction Hall of Fame, Volume 1, specifically. The greatest science fiction stories of all time, edited by Robert Silverberg, chosen by the members of the Science Fiction Writers of America. So they ought to know, theoretically, which are some of the best stories ever. There's a little blurb down here at the bottom. Definitive, even lines up to its subtitle. That's by Lester Del Rey. So once again, the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, Volume 1. Some stories in here that I recognize and that you'll recognize right off the bat, I'm sure. Nightfall by Isaac Asimov is one in here that I know a lot of people have read. Ray Bradbury has one story in here, Mars is Heaven. I've not read these. If you have read any of these books that I'm showing off, or if you've read the stories, do let me know in the comments. Let me know what you thought of them. The 9 Billion Names of God by Arthur C. Clarke. It's a Good Life by Jerome Bixby. And I'm wondering if that would happen to be the source material for the famous Twilight Zone episode with the creepy, all-powerful kid who keeps sending people he doesn't like to the cornfield. I guess we'll find out. The Cold Equations by Tom Godwin. Oh, geez. The 1980s version of the Twilight Zone did that story for one of its episodes. Traumatized me a little bit too at the time. So I'll do a review of that at some point. That was a very memorable episode, and I know other people who've seen it say the same thing. So Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes is in this, and the last one, A Rose for Ecclesiastes by Roger Zelazny. No, I thought it was Roger Zelazny. I guess it's Roger Zelazny, unless that's a misprint. So we'll find out what's going on here. Unfortunately, and I did not realize this until I had bought the book, but I mean, I got it for $1. I really can't complain. The very first story, A Martian Odyssey, by Stanley Weinbaum, that got cut. The first 14 pages of the book are missing. So that's disappointing. I'll have to look it up, see if I can find it on Kindle or get it some other way online and get those first 14 pages if I intend to read that story. So I'm looking forward to this. Again, if it lives up to the hype, lives up to the subtitle, it ought to be great. So let me know again if you've read these stories, which ones, the ones I've mentioned, might be your favorite if you have this book, especially. Next one, the Book of Poul Anderson, who's an author that I really have not read too much of. The Book of Poul Anderson, a treasure box of SF by the Master of Masters. And nice vintage cover on there. You know, that was one of the things that actually got me into reading some of these books when I was younger, was just the crazy covers on them. The cover art, it always was so intriguing. And sometimes the cover art had absolutely nothing to do with any of the stories in the book. It was just somebody said, you know, this looks science fiction-y. I think I'll put this on here. It'll get people to pick it up and buy it. Well, it worked. Stories in this one are mostly by Poul Anderson, but there are a couple in here that, let's see. Yeah, one in here, Patrick McGuire, has a story called Her Strong Enchantments Failing. But the rest of the stories are Paul, Sandra and Mizell, Challenge and Response. But the others appear to be Poul Anderson. Tomorrow's Children, The Queen of Air and Darkness, Her Strong Enchantments Failing Again, Epilogue, The Longest Voyage, Challenge and Response, Journey's End, A World Named Cleopatra, interesting, The Sheriff of Canyon Gulch, and Day of Burning. Those are the stories in the Book of Poul Anderson. So let me know if you've read any of those stories, what I can expect to find here. That ought to be interesting. This book was published, I saw the publication date just a second ago. This was 1975, June of 1975. So I was 2 years old at the time. See how that is. The next book is another older book. This one is The Explorers by C.M. Kornbluth, who is not somebody I had heard of before. 50 cents was the price for this back in the day from Ballantine Books. This book was published, let's see, 1963, March of 1963. A series of stories by Mr. Kornbluth here. This, again, I have not read this author, so I don't know what to expect. The stories: Gomez, The Mind Worm, The Rocket of 1955, The Altar at Midnight, 13 O'Clock, The Goodly Creatures, Friend to Man, With These Hands, and That Share of Glory. So this is, a real short book here. It's only, 150 pages? So these are short stories. So that ought to be interesting. Like that old 60s sci-fi cover, the back there. The back blurb here is mostly about other books that he's written. So, but again, I had never heard of C.M. Kornbluth before. So if you have, let me know. Let me know what those stories are like if you've read them. Next one here is a classic many of you will be familiar with. This is The Warlord of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. I had never read Edgar Rice Burroughs until just recently. I started on his Mars series, the John Carter of Mars series, or Barsoom series, as it's also known. The Warlord of Mars is the third book in that series that was written by Mr. Burroughs. This is a authorized edition, it says, by Edgar Rice Burroughs, Inc. So, interesting older copy, vintage copy here. This is published, March 1963. So, ought to be interesting there. Not too long of a book. Like I said, I just recently started reading this series, The Princess of Mars. I am almost done with it. Kind of slow getting into it, but then once I did get into it, I really started to enjoy it. It took off and became very interesting. I liked his writing style. Not too long ago, I picked up the first 5 books in this collection on Amazon. The John Carter of Mars series. These are, I think this is a print-on-demand title from the first 5 books which I believe are all in the public domain. The rest of the series is not, but these are. So there's a number of different printings that you can get out there, print on demand, ebooks that you can get the series. So that's interesting. I am enjoying The Princess of Mars. We'll see how that goes. Then this particular book I had heard Michael Vaughn talking about on his channel. Apparently a friend of his gave them this to read, was raving about it in the 1990s, and Michael's like, yeah, I'll read this, and still has not. So he's been talking about it a couple of times recently. This is The Anubis Gates by Tim Powers. This sounds a little bit like something I really haven't read before. It's a time travel book. I haven't read much of that before. Matter of fact, I, to my shame, must admit that I have not read H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, which seems unbelievable for somebody who's as big a reader as I am. I just never have. So that is something I intend to remedy very soon. But the Anubis Gates, backward in time to solve an ancient mystery and create some new ones. According to what it says here, an ancient Egyptian sorcerer whose powerful magic can change the history of the entire world. A modern millionaire with a sinister plan who journeys back to England in 1810. A werewolf who switches bodies, then kills his victims to keep his identity a secret. A hideously deformed clown of crime who performs grotesque experiments on his victims, so really mean Joker. A brainwashed Lord Byron programmed to kill King George. A young woman disguised as a boy, haunting the thing that killed her lover. And our hero, Professor Brendan Doyle, who has no idea what he's getting into when he agrees to give a lecture on Samuel Taylor Coleridge. The Anubis Gates, a time travel novel you'll never forget. And interesting to see what year this was actually published. It's got some interesting quotes there at the very beginning. This is 1983. Tim Powers, 1983, starts off with Heraclitus. Actually, great quote. No man can step into the same river twice. For the second time, it's not the same river, and he is not the same man. So we'll see how the Anubis Gates is. Again, a little bit of a departure from anything I've read before. The next book is one I already have 2 copies of. Yes, my name is Robert, and I am a bookaholic. Actually, I have an excuse for this, though. This is The Wounded Sky by Diane Duane. This is the best Star Trek novel I have ever read. It's not just a great Star Trek novel, it's a great sci-fi novel. It's just a great concept. And Diane Duane is a great writer, handles it very, very well. The reason I have multiple copies of this book, this was originally given to me for my 16th birthday by my best friend. And he really scored, too. He hit gold. I mean, considering all the Trek books that were out there at the time, I could have easily gotten a dud, but it turns out this went right to the top. So that was a great choice. I love this book. This is one of the few books that I return to over and over again. I've read this book several times. Highly recommend it. If you're not into Star Trek fiction, maybe you want to experiment, get your feet wet in it. You can't do any better than this. This is really great. That copy, unfortunately, that was originally given to me, my kids knocked it off the shelf one day and ripped the cover. Then I found another copy in a bookstore, but it wasn't in great shape, but I still wanted a decent reading copy that wasn't falling apart. So I picked that up. And then today I found this. And this is in great shape, actually. The old Timescape label on there, many of you recognize. And this is in great shape for a book of this age. This was published in the 80s sometime. 1983. Diane Duane later on came back to revisit this in an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, where no one has gone before, I think, is what that episode was called. That'll be interesting to reread again, which I will do, but I wanted to get that great copy of it they have there, but I can't say enough about that book. At some point I'll do an actual review on it. In the meantime, I'll say Diane Duane is one of those writers who really captures the original crew very well, their established characters. Some writers don't do that. You read their books and you're kind of like, have you seen this show? Because, that's not Spock, or Captain Kirk would never do that. Diane Duane hits the nail on the head when it comes to the characters. She captures the characters we know and love from Star Trek, and then she adapts them, puts them into new situations, more fully fleshes them out in an SF world, and does a great job with it. And she's one of the best that I've come across at that. So highly recommend that, again, if you don't get the point by now. Next one, Christopher Pike, Tachyon Web. Christopher Pike, well known for his young adult novels, a lot of them with covers that kind of pop with those colors and lettering like R.L. Stine type books. The guy at the bookstore today sold this to me, Heroes and Dragons in Columbia, South Carolina. If you haven't ever been there, comic store, also collectibles and used books. Lots of stuff in there, DVDs, everything you can think of. They've got some great stuff in there. Highly recommend that. I want to give them a shout out. Don't get by there as often as I'd like to. Don't know anything about this book, except what it says on the back here. They did it for kicks. 5 young thrill seekers in a stolen spaceship on a joyride to the stars. But one of them had a more dangerous plan, to blast beyond the Tachyon web, the iron boundary that barred mankind from the worlds beyond. There they found danger, excitement, and heart-stopping adventure. And on a strange alien world, one of them would also find love. So, the Tachyon web, the idea that there's some kind of a barrier that is keeping humanity back somehow, whether that's self-imposed or whether aliens have been watching the news and said, no, you humans are not allowed to spread into the galaxy. We will not allow that. Kind of the day the earth stood still type of thing. So we'll see. They broke the boundaries of space to find a world of danger and wonder. I flipped through it. The writing seems like it's pretty straightforward. Probably will be a pretty quick read. So, but I am looking forward to that. Sometimes you find these gems, you just never know. Last book. This is Fred Saberhagen or Saberhagen, the Dracula tape. This was a book that came out in the 70s, and I remember seeing it in bookstores back in the 80s. I would go into Crown Books, especially. That was our go-to store at the time. Really about the only dedicated bookstore we had in the area at that time, the Washington, D.C. area, and I think it was a D.C. area thing. But I remember seeing this on the shelves with a different cover at that time, flipping through it and thought it was interesting, and I wanted to get into it, but for some reason never actually bought it and did. So I am finally going to remedy that situation. And this seems very interesting. The Transylvania Society of Dracula has declared this to be the best novel inspired by Dracula in the past century. I had never heard of a Transylvania Society of Dracula, but if you're going to have one, where else you're going to have such a place, such a thing rather. Anyway, back blurb here reads, those who have read Dracula or seen any of the myriad movie and TV versions have heard one side of the story. But the truth is that Vlad Tepes, known more widely as Count Dracula, is one of nature's noblemen, not the vile monster portrayed by Bram Stoker and his imitators. Okay? Perhaps you are now ready for the true story of the events surrounding the Count's first sojourn in England in the year of our Lord, 1891. So, Dracula's of the opinion that his name has been dragged through the mud, and he's out to clear it. Interesting to see what he has to say about the events, how they supposedly really happened. Dracula has got some cheek here, definitely, in this book, I know. Just flipping through and reading some things. His commentary, for instance, on Van Helsing's diary is interesting. He points out how Van Helsing repeatedly refers to women with the term voluptuous, suggesting that Dr. Van Helsing has some kind of a problem, a little bit of a fixation there. So it should be interesting. A little bit of comedy woven into this and Dracula's take on things. So looking forward to getting into that. Again, if this is one you've read, I know it's been out for a long time. It was pretty popular, enough copies of it floating around. If you've read it, let me know. If you've read any of these, or any of these stories, let me know in the comments and be interested to hear on that. I'm interested to get into these. And still, yes, I will get to you. I will get to you, older books. I will do it. Darkness at Noon is not impressed, not persuaded. So, thank you for watching. I did give a shout out to Heroes and Dragons in Columbia, South Carolina, here where we are, where it has been ungodly hot this past summer. But we're finally starting to get a break, a little bit of fall weather coming in. Also, in the Columbia area is the Book Dispensary, where I picked a few of these up today. Those are my 2 go-to used bookstores in this area right now. If you're ever around, highly recommend you stop in and patronize those people. I try every place I go, I look for new used bookstores and drop in, try to spend some money there. It's important to keep these places open, I think. I love ebooks and all that sort of thing, and audiobooks as well, but getting your hands on the physical books, still nothing like that. Maybe it's just an older person thing, I don't know. But I'm glad to see so many of these stores up and running and functional. Any of you in Alaska, in Anchorage, there's a used bookstore called Tidal Wave, Title, Tidal Wave. It's another great used bookstore that comes to mind. I picked up a couple titles there. So in the future, I may bring you some reviews from this material that I picked up here, along with the whole backlog of stuff. Thank you for watching. Thank you for those who have recently subscribed and left comments and likes and all of that. And I will be back soon with some more of something. This coming week, if the schedule holds, I'll have my first interview for this channel with Mr. Dick Dysel. Those of you who grew up like I did in the Washington, D.C. area in the 1970s and 80s will know Mr. Dysel better as Captain 20. Or if you stayed up later in the evenings as Count Gore Duvall, horror host extraordinaire. So I'm really looking forward to that. A guy I grew up watching, and it'll be fun to talk to him, I think. So thank you again for watching, and until next time, God bless. Yes, Nathaniel Hawthorne collection. I will read you, I promise. Now shut up. Wait a minute. Is this thing still recording?